All right, let's start up. Hey, everybody. Let's call the meeting to order and do a pledge. All right. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Let me do a roll call. I am looking around the room and I see the entire council is present. If someone's not present, would you let me know? I see Drew online and I see the city administrator here, so that'll take care of roll call. We have a couple of community segments. The first one we'll do is the swearing in of a new police officer, Jerome Burton. Sands, do you want to introduce our new colleague, and I'll come out and we'll do the book and all that?
Everybody's met Jerome already. The last meeting, and you started with us last Tuesday. Jerome's a Beacon High School graduate. He's attended our youth academy a couple times, done a ride-along program, successfully completed our background, which is pretty extensive, and we're glad to have him on board. I'm just waiting for an academy to start.
And got to do this. It's the fun part. All right, Jerome, give me a hand. Yeah. All right. So, I, Jerome Burton, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I'll support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of City of Beacon Police Department
the duties of the City of Beacon Police Department
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Chief. All right, we need a group anything, or you want one of those somehow? You did, all right? Yeah. All right, if you want to congratulate the council, that'd be great.
Don't lose that book. You're in deep trouble when you lose that book.
All right, one down.
Should I take it?
It'll be here.
Okay.
So the second one is a presentation by the Dutchess County Industrial Development Agency, known as the IDA, and we're very fortunate to have Sarah Lee here. Are you the CEO? Is that what the title is?
Yes. I'm the CEO of Think Dutchess, but the executive director of the IDA.
Okay.
I have a couple titles.
All right. So welcome. And this is very helpful for us because we don't have a ton of experience with pilots in Beacon. They're pretty few and far between. But if you could help us understand it, that would be great.
Yeah,
so thank you for coming.
So I hope I am able to achieve that. So thank you for having me tonight. As I mentioned, I'm also the CEO of Think Dutchess. For those who don't know me, Think Dutchess is economic development organization for Dutchess County. It's not a county agency, but we work with the county to do economic development on behalf of the county. So one thing I did want to share with you is my love for Beacon. This is our inaugural magazine that we use to help with talent attraction and retention. A lot of our larger employers like IBM, New Vance now, use these magazines to attract talent here as well as to retain talent, and then we also use it as a marketing tool to attract businesses here. So on the cover you may recognize it's a local business, Flora, and then we have a whole chapter in here about Beacon, showcasing, let's see, your DIA, your Main Street, and it's really about the quality of life that Beacon, creates here. Niche, is at that. So it's a great tool for us, and Beacon, and I will tell you, when I travel and for businesses and I say Beacon, you know, where do you live? I go, well, do you know where Beacon is? And they're like, oh, I know where Beacon is. So it's really been a great asset for us to market. So Think Dutchess, real quick, we're charged with business attraction and retention, business expansion, entrepreneurship, and we market the county as a good place to live, work, and play. One of the tools that we do use to help achieve that is with the IDA. The IDA was created by the New York State Legislature back in 1977 to administer tax incentives to promote industrial development, to attract additional industry, and to encourage and develop commerce and industry to create additional employment, prevent economic deterioration, and to create jobs. The incentives approved by the IDA helps businesses retain and create jobs, remain competitive, and invest more private money into Dutchess County. So there are a couple tools that the IDA uses. One is sales tax exemptions during the period of construction for construction materials. That's a temporary sales tax benefit. A mortgage tax benefit, where we exempt mortgage tax benefit. Only the county portion. The projects still need to pay the MTA portion of the mortgage tax. And the other is a pilot, which I'm here this evening to talk about. So to kind of frame my discussion of pilots, I have a little short video I'd like to play, so I don't know.
Yep, I'll pull it up for
You're
you.
going to tell us what PILOT stands for,
Oh,
right?
pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes.
Thank you.
Economic development is the engine that helps communities grow successfully. It creates housing, employment, opportunities, improves shared natural resources, and fosters a thriving business environment. One of the tools economic developers use to bolster the economy is a pilot. What is a pilot? A payment in lieu of taxes is a property tax abatement or an incremental tax payment. The abatement acts as a financial incentive to undergo an economic development project. Under a pilot, a company agrees to invest in equipment and/or real estate and create jobs in return for a temporary reduction in property taxes. Pilots can support a company's decision to invest capital in projects that create jobs and increase the county's tax base. Let's look at a pilot in action. A Dutchess company is growing and needs to purchase equipment and add 20 employees. Investing in the existing facilities will increase the assessed property value and make staying in Dutchess County cost prohibitive. It must decide to 1. Not expand, 2. Invest at their current location, 3. Relocate to a more cost-effective alternative. Rather than potentially lose employees moving out of state, they decide to apply for a pilot to offset some of the expansion costs. There are many valid questions regarding pilots. Will I have to make up for taxes not paid? No. The pilot is an abatement, but does not create a budget deficit that is paid for by the public. Do companies with pilots have to pay special district taxes, such as fire, water, and sewer? Yes. Companies receiving pilots still pay special district taxes at full assessment. Are pilots given to companies that have already committed to undergoing the project? No. Expansion would not occur but for the IDA's assistance. So to review, through pilots, companies are encouraged to invest capital in projects that create jobs and increase the county's tax base, thereby improving the quality of life for Dutchess County residents. For more information on pilot projects, please visit us at www.thinkdutchess.com and follow us on social media to find out what makes Dutchess a great place to live, work, and play.
So that briefly describes in generalities how a pilot works. It does talk about special districts, and I know that Cedar Beacon treats special districts differently, so that might not apply.
Yeah, we don't have special districts. Our fire department is not a district, it's part of the city. So that's not relevant to us in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, but in essence, what it is it slowly introduces the full tax rate of for a project once improvements and investments are made. There are certain criteria that IDAs use. We are a state authority, and New York State dictates by law and regulation the type of projects that we can do. So we do commercial and industrial projects. We don't do retail projects. We don't do service projects, and I say that in general. There are exceptions to the rule, but in general, it is limited to industrial and commercial projects. Other things that IDAs take into consideration for a pilot is the amount of investment a business is going to do, the improvements that it's going to make onto the property, the nature of the business, the impact of the project is going to have on area businesses, and the amount of tax revenue that will be created with the creation of the job. So that's some of the criteria that is included. Chris had mentioned that he included in your board packet this evening our uniform tax exemption policy, which kind of goes into more detail of the criteria that we use.
And I'm sorry, but that wasn't uploaded. We will be uploading it. And Ben, if you can put that up, I'd appreciate it.
It should be in the latest copy, but I'll double check it.
Thank you.
So, but that's the criteria that outlines what we do. And we monitor the projects during the life of the period, that they do meet the commitments that they have promised when they are granted the pilot. So, and we have recapture clauses. So if they don't meet those things that they have said that they would deliver, the IDA has the authority to recapture those benefits. So basically, that's kind of a pilot in a really short nutshell. The IDA has the authority to pass pilots. In this case, you are, I know you guys are considering the pilot for the Mirbeau project at the former Craig House location. One of the policies that we have at our particular IDA, this does not apply to IDAs in the state, but just for us, is we do like to hear the input of the local municipality with these pilots, especially a DV8 pilot. Our standard tenure pilot, we don't necessarily ask for the municipality's consent or support of that pilot, but for deviateds we do, because it is an enhancement or a deviation of our standard tenure.
Could you clarify, you're not asking for consent, you're asking for support as a factor in your decision?
Yes.
But statutorily, there's no...
Well, statutorily, we're not asking for approval.
Right.
We're not, so the city doesn't have, so the IDA is the one who approves the agreement and the pilot. What we're asking for is acknowledgement that you know that Mirbeau is coming to the IDA for an enhanced pilot and support of the project.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm looking under the last page where the hotel and motel projects of this helpful attachment, and it says that the project, that it's a requirement for the project to have written support from the taxing jurisdiction. So if you did not have written support from both the city and the school district, we would not be able to proceed with you wouldn't be able to approve the IDA.
So I will say the board still has, statutorily still has the authority to approve, but my board strongly believes in supporting a municipality's development the way the community wants to develop. And so if there is no written support, it means that you don't want that project. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to go ahead and put a project on that the community may not want.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm curious in your experience how much you're aware of how other municipalities go about determining whether or not they're going to support it, particularly how much the body that would issue the letter kind of discusses it publicly versus it's made sort of a decision that doesn't necessarily involve public conversation at whatever the local government level is. And I'm curious just in what you've seen. You might not have insight, but just if you have any.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mix. I would say that if a municipality has an extensive strategic plan, and the project fits within that strategic plan, and that plan also addresses a pilot, and some do, for certain types of projects. Usually there might not be as much public input from the town or the city as those that may be, in this case, where you don't see pilots quite so often in the city of Beacon. There might be a little bit more public discussion, at the council level. So, but it really, I would say it depends. I would say I've seen certain municipalities where it's just mentioned and then approved, and then some where it's actually, an item that they get public input on. I will also say that part of the IDA process is a public hearing. So the IDA does hold a public hearing in the municipality that the project is being put in to collect that public opinion.
Oh, okay.
In addition to getting the council's support.
So I can give you a little bit of color of what's in our comprehensive plan. So for a number of years, our comprehensive plan was simply looking to rejuvenate the community, looking largely at residential construction as a way of doing that. We revised our comprehensive plan to kind of strive for more of a live-work community, and so the importance of commercial has grown. We're not very experienced at that. I think our first pilot of note was DIA, and that was the New York State Development Organization putting a substantial investment, because it never would have happened without it, which has been transformative. But more recently, we've got along our creek and at our waterfront are the only kind of significant sites left of development, and those we have required a commercial component in the hopes of attracting good paying jobs so that we can have more of a live-work community that's consistent with our comprehensive plan. That this is by far the largest available site. It was zoned residential. In fact, it was zoned, I think it was R140 or R180. So it's 2-acre zoning, which would be a limited number of homes. It laid fallow for more than 30 years. There were several proposals along the way. The residential ones would all have netted some property tax and then also school children to the district. So the net impact actually might have been negative on at least the school tax situation. This project converts that residential zoning to commercial. So the first thing that it does is we have 2 tax rates in the city of Beacon. We have a higher rate for commercial property than we do residential by about 40%. So immediately that generates 40% additional revenue on exactly the same site at exactly the same assessment, simply because it shifted to commercial, which is one of the reasons we're very interested. And in our comprehensive plan, we lay out the goal of increasing our commercial. If we're able to do that at that site, the other one that occurred most recently, and I believe the IDA was involved in, was the DocuWare site, which is in that same area. It's not the same zoning. That's Fishkill Creek zoning, which requires 25% commercial. That was a recent zoning change that we undertook consistent with our comprehensive plan. So we are looking at those. We're very appreciative of the DocuWare. That's a huge win for our community. And apparently it required the IDA, the pilot, in order to kind of make the numbers work. We have a couple more like that, one along the creek, maybe a second along the creek, and then we're out of property unless we can work something with the Camp Beacon former prison site or possibly some adjacent prison land. So just to let you know, it's in our comprehensive plan.
Can you say a little more about, because you have approved projects in the past, and you said that you have public meetings. Is there documentation of your decisions that member of the public could look at so they can understand how you've made decisions in the past, both for and against proposals?
Yes, so it's all on our IDA website. All the project documents, the minutes of our meetings, the agreements that the projects are held to, so and the original application.
Another question is, I'm curious, a municipality might be in support of a project because it fits with a comprehensive plan and still have questions about, but does this particular developer need this financial support in order for the project to be viable? And I'm curious if that's something you're also looking at when you have your public hearings and making your determination.
Yeah, so we do a cost-benefit analysis. So that cost-benefit analysis, and you'll see for hotels, we actually do ask for a third-party study as well, because to see if there is a need for this type of project and if the IDA assistance is required. In my experience, hotel projects, and especially resort projects, it is, they do, looking at their financials, they do need that, especially as a result of COVID. We've had, just in case in point, we had several hotel projects in the queue pre-COVID, and then after COVID, a lot of those projects either went away or have been stalled because hotels are considered very risky projects. During COVID, no one traveled, no one stayed at a hotel, there were no conventions, things like that. So that ability to create revenue and to pay off their loans. So banks have increased what's called their cost to debt or ratio. That ratio has gotten much bigger for hotels in the past, so they're considered a risk. So IDA's pilots are often used to help mitigate some of that risk, to guarantee that. And in this case, the 15-year pilot aligns with their financing terms. It is something that it is to meet their financing in order to qualify for their financing on this project.
Thank you.
Would this project be considered an adaptive reuse?
Yes.
Yes.
And does that, maybe I read it incorrectly, but it said that hotels wouldn't qualify if it was an adaptive reuse?
So hotels are in a gray area as far as state regulation and IDAs are concerned. So we are not generally allowed to incentivize like a hotel if it supports area tourism. So let's say like a Holiday Inn or a Marriott Courtyard. It would be very difficult for us to support because people don't necessarily traveling to stay at that particular Marriott Courtyard. Right? They're coming, they stay at that Marriott Courtyard because they're going to look, climb Mount Beacon, enjoy the restaurants in Beacon, and like Wappingers and such. But in this case, we can consider Mirbeau because people are going to be traveling to Mirbeau itself because it's going to be a destination, and that then qualifies under the state's definition of what a tourism project is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and IDAs are allowed to work on tourism projects.
Have you begun negotiations with Mirbeau about this?
So this is actually, I have not received a formal application from Mirbeau. What we like to see is we like to see them have the support, show support from the municipality before they come to the IDA.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we haven't had any negotiations on this, but I've done a little bit of preliminary work on, I've had conversations with them, we have met about the scope of their project. They have shared that 15-year pilot with me.
And would that, maybe it's a question for Chris, would that, Mirbeau, would they come here to the council, or would be a discussion that you would have on the side?
No, I mean, we discussed this in executive session. I don't know if you were absent.
I missed that meeting.
Okay, so we did have conversations with the IDA about what the proposed pilot would be and what the potential cost benefit would be. And the IDA advised us that this isn't out of the ordinary. One of the other things that they mentioned that Sarah forgot maybe to mention is that the cost of construction is also very high, and we're seeing that right across the board, including the firehouse. So your square foot cost of construction has gone up markedly, and they're having trouble. they have to raise more than $40 million in financing to be able to make the project go. We did look at what the tax impact was on this, and this is not the only pilot. We're going to have another pilot coming for Tompkins Terrace because they're doing a $14 or $15 million renovation, and they want to extend out a pilot. So we thought this is a good time to talk about pilots because you do pilots for economic development, but you can also do it for affordable housing. Right now, this site at Craig House is assessed at $3 million, and that assessment actually went down in 2017 or 2018 because it was challenged because there was no use of the project, of the property. Within a few years of this pilot, that goes up to $25 million. Right now, the property pays just under $100,000 in taxes to the 4 entities that collect taxes: the county, the city, the school district, and the library. By year 7, that's estimated to go up to $830,000. So while this sounds like a tax break, you hear a tax break and you're like, oh wow, my taxes are going to go up because now I got to pay for somebody not paying their taxes. What this is doing is basically allowing them to get financing to put all these tens of millions of dollars into the facility that raise the assessment, and then they get a discount on that. But even with the discount, you're still going within 7 years from $100,000 in taxes a year to over $800,000. So that's what we looked at. We talked about it in executive session. We talked to our attorneys who said you don't need a vote, you just need to kind of notify the council, feel out how it goes. And we have issued an initial letter saying we're open to the concept. Now we want to see the eventual deal and that it's complies with what we understood it would be. But again, in theory, before they even go and apply, they did have conversations with us. I went over and saw the facility. The old Howland mansion is in awful shape. I hadn't seen it in 25 years. And it's a challenging building to have to renovate and a challenging site because they have limitations on what they can do with the historic features like the windows in the building. They're also limited on what they can do on parts of the site because they're pre-settlement archaeological sites. So again, their cost to develop this, because it's an adaptive reuse and a challenging property, it is really expensive. And they're going to demolish the old wing that got built in the 70s that has not only no historic value, but probably a negative historic value. And they'll bring the mansion back to its glory.
Chris, if I can just add too, is again, I'm glad you brought it up, is that the cost of materials have gone up markedly since the pandemic. And I have one hotel project in the county that is receiving IDA benefits. Pre-COVID, the budget was $18 million. Now it's $36 million. They have come back to the IDA for additional benefits because of the increased cost of construction materials and labor. They also are about 4 years behind in projects because they lost their financing at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's taken them up until late last year to find a new lender that will be willing to finance them based on the terms of the pilot that was approved pre-COVID. So they do have impact, and the other thing is adaptive reuse projects are more expensive than new construction because you are often confined by certain rules of construction and things that you can do. And the other thing is, it's not necessarily lost revenue for tax because this is a before. They won't be able to do it without the assistance of the IDA. So if they don't get IDA assistance, they wouldn't go forward with the project. So it's not revenue that you would necessarily lose. We're just debating the difference between the current assessment and the new assessment.
And it's not a done deal that this comes through. That's the thing to think about. When they started this project, their estimates for what they would have to put into the building materials and all the construction was about $45 million. Since that time, it's already escalated to $54 million. And again, I'm scared about the firehouse project next year. We're going to have some similar escalation of the square foot price to do these projects. And we're seeing it even in the insurance. When we bring you insurance, you know, the cost of replacement of construction has gone up. The other factor that we looked at is the job creation. This is about 100 permanent jobs. Again, some of them are low wage, like cleaning the rooms, but some of them are managers and you know, people that run the spa. There's also about 200 to 300 construction jobs. So all of the trades, you're going to have carpenters and plumbers, electricians, site work, excavators. You know, so again, that gives people alternatives for staying here when they might have had a commute somewhere or move to another community.
The other unique thing about this job is it is a hospitality and tourism project. So it would be, you know, act as while it could be an anchor for your community, those people who visit the area would also, you know, eat at your local restaurants, shop in your local shops, and add, you know, additional revenue for those shops along Main Street as well. So there is, we also, in addition to direct economic development benefits, we also look at indirect and induced benefits as well.
Sarah, with regards to the job creation, you said that you check in with the project to make sure that they're creating the jobs. What kind of enforcement is there if they don't meet those criteria?
So they are required to report to us on an annual basis on the number of jobs, on FTEs that they have on site. We are then required to report that to New York State. That is a statute that they must that they do. We also do at least one site visit to the property a year, not only to, you know, make sure everything is going fine, but on the Think Dutchess part, it's just there are other, you know, we have a what we called a green flag, yellow flag, red flag system, where if a business is not doing well, that we're able to come in and give, you know, assist them so they don't go into that red flag, which usually means that business is going to close.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm glad to hear there's reporting, but what are the consequences of them? Like if, let's say, if we only end up with 50 full-time jobs and 100 construction jobs, what are the consequences? Do we get our taxes back?
You do. Okay. So we have a recapture policy, and so they have to maintain 90% of the jobs that they have said that they were going to create as part of their application, which then becomes in their agreement. If they fail to meet that requirement, they are then required to come in front of the board and explain why they did not meet that requirement. So, and it could be ranged from, the board has its discretion, but it could be market forces, right? So it could be COVID happened and we lost a lot of employees. So at that point we may not recapture. But if the business says, well, we replaced all our employees with robots, that's not the intention of the policy, then the board can come in and say, well, we're going to recapture that because you know, that's not the intention. So we will recapture those benefits, and then those return to the taxpayer. The other thing that can happen is if there is a multiple violation or a gross violation of the agreement, we can terminate that agreement, the pilot agreement, and return them to the tax rolls, and they will pay full assessed value at that point.
I have a couple of questions about the taxes. So I guess what I've been trying to compare this to is what taxes would they have had to pay, or would any business have had to pay had this 11-year program not existed? Meaning, from my understanding, the Mirabeau project is supposed to be built in phases. So wouldn't they only have to pay tax on the assessed value with what's built on there? I mean, they don't have to pay taxes on what they're planning on building 7 years from now, right? So what's the big change here for them, I guess?
In terms of what they're paying taxes on?
Yeah, so if they're slowly building the project out over a 10-year period, which is what we learned was going on, wouldn't they only have to pay taxes on what was built in that given year?
No, well, so the taxes, the pilot is just a percentage of the current assessment. So their assessment can go up. So let's say in year 1 through 5, they only build that one building, and then that assessment is going to be $10 million. But then 3 years later, they add to their campus, and then now the whole property is worth $18 million. So their taxes are their assessment has gone up, and therefore the rate and the percentage, the amount of taxes that they will pay on that property goes up, but the pilot percentage that's taken goes down over time. So let's say in year 3, they pay it's 50% of the assessment at that time, right, of 10 million. But in year 6, it's 18 million, but now they're down to like 30%. So it's only abated on whatever they owe.
Meaning they're paying 70.
So they're paying
Of the-
70%.
of the
They're paying
18.
70% of the value of the increased value.
Okay, and the no assessment's done until it's not a project until it clears the planning board, right? So there's no assessment that even exists, so we don't even know what the assessed value would be.
Correct.
So we have estimates from the appraiser, from our assessor. So our assessor did have conversations with them to try to figure out what a conservative estimate of what the assessed value would be. And she came up with $25 million starting in year 7. And again, it goes, my understanding is that the school board, it was mentioned that the assessment is also frozen, and that is not the case. It's not being proposed for this. Pilots can take very different forms. In this case, the only thing that they're locking in is the discount rate on the taxes overall. So the first 3 years, 4 years, or first 5 years are 50%, then it goes down to 45%, a discount. And again, each year, their assessed value could go up higher than what we've estimated. We asked them to do a pretty conservative estimation. And what I think we looked at was that the net increase in taxes was significant, even with the pilot.
So my last question about the taxes is, I'm very happy to hear that there's no additional tax burden on taxpayers by doing this. But then I'm thinking, maybe this is a question for you, Lee, how the base proportions come into play. So if we have this big surge in commercial tax revenue with or without the IDA, but if the commercial can only be 30% of our tax levy, doesn't that push some of the tax burden over to the residential side?
So,
Confusing.
yeah, no, but you're right. The only person in the room who has even the slightest clue on how that arcane thing works, yeah, probably me, unless you have some idea. So we're a community that has 2 tax rates.
Yes.
The statute that approved that system 40 years ago has this very arcane method of calculating. I believe, and I cannot say this with certainty, that new construction can change those proportions. In other words, what it tries to keep in place is ignoring new construction. Here are the 2 ratios, but then they have to take into account new construction. So, if 1,000 new homes are generated, that 70% will change to a higher number, and it goes the same in the other direction. So this is new commercial construction and actually a removal of residential property from the roll. So I believe it will change those proportions. That's what I understand, but I can't guarantee that. I can bring in an expert to understand it, but I'm pretty sure that's right, because it also makes sense, right?
I mean, yeah, instead of having a whole other presentation.
You don't want to know. Yeah.
Maybe we can just check with the assessor or the board of assessment.
There's a regional director of the Office of Real Property Tax Services who could help us understand that.
Yeah, and in general, that's correct.
Oh, okay, so you know something about split two rate rolls.
When you have with homestead and non-homestead, there are municipalities that have percentage limitations on that. And so what happens is when commercial creates a greater portion, it actually kicks off some of the residential equation. So it ends up that commercial ends up paying more of your tax burden than the residential. So it can lower the residential tax burden.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then the other thing I just want to reiterate is that the only part of this agreement that is fixed is the percentage that is taken off the tax roll in each of the years, and that what is allowed to vary is the assessment at all times and the tax rate, right? And the assessment is set by the assessor.
Correct.
And there'll be a function of whatever the value is that they establish each year.
Yeah, so the IDA bills for the pilot, we have to wait for your city to assess it and what your tax rate is before we bill it.
And I just wanted to correct a number I put out there. The current tax bill is just under 100,000. Year 7, when it's at full value, because of the discount, it would be just over 400,000. But then it eventually gets up to the full value.
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
generalizations based on
I can
the,
put it up on the screen. Lee, do you want it up on the screen? We had gotten permission to share that.
Okay.
Let me put it up on the screen so people have an idea of these columns that we're talking about. So you can see in the first column is the year, and it goes out 15 years as a deviated pilot. Then the second column is the year of the agreement, so you have 1 through 15. After 15, it expires. The assessment right now is $3 million, and you'll see that it takes a few years for them to build this. By 2024 and 2025, I'm not sure why that's shaded. Most of it is online, and then they build their business. Now, when they get assessed, there's a formula that they use with the assessor, and this is a function of how much revenue they're taking in. Commercial is done in a different way than your home would be. So then you'll see the increase over the original assessment. Again, these assessments are just estimates, and they're probably low. The tax rate is the current tax rate of all the taxing entities. But again, that's subject to change. And you'll see by year 7, their full tax bill would have been $831,000. With the discount, it's at $400,000, and then it goes up from there.
And this means that every year, this property will be reassessed? Because I think right now, only residential is assessed every year, is that right?
No, every property is looked at.
Every year?
Yeah, every year. It's a full value city.
Oh, I
So-
thought there was a thing where on the commercial properties that it was only every couple of years and residential is years.
It's up to the assessor to determine, right? If they feel that there's been a substantial change, then they have to update.
Okay.
If they feel there's not, they can go less frequently.
But this would qualify as a substantial change.
Again, I don't want to speak for the assessor, but I wouldn't be surprised, right?
I think she would watch it because it's going to be one of your single highest paying tax parcels.
Yeah.
You know, again, if there's an agreement, we only have a handful of pilots that we monitor. Most of them are housing, like Beacon Housing Authority, Tompkins Terrace, South Davies Terrace, Meadow Ridge
1 and 2.
Meadow Ridge 1 and 2, and Highland Meadow. They all have pilots. So we keep an eye on those because they're significant.
One thing, so in addition to the initial assessment, once project is complete, as well as if the project continues to do capital improvements, so when they bring in the different phases and adding to that assessment, once it's completely built, that assessment changes if the entire city's assessment changes, because you can't assess properties individually once if it doesn't continue to improve upon itself.
So, thanks.
I just wanted to confirm this document will end up on our public agenda so the public can reference it. Is that right? Or
Yeah,
are we showing it right now?
We're showing it right now, but we can put it on in the agenda packet.
Great.
Yeah. I got permission this afternoon to be able to share it. This was kind
No,
of...
it's very helpful.
Yeah.
Right, and those aren't like guaranteed numbers.
No,
Those
it's
are
just an estimate.
representative
We don't know what the
numbers.
assessment is.
Yeah.
So-
The only guaranteed number under the pilot is the second to last column, the pilot percentage.
And presumably the year.
Hopefully.
I had 2 clarifying questions, just because I feel like the language keeps changing exactly. Is it a requirement of the pilot that the applicant demonstrate that they would not be able to do this project without the pilot?
So it is not a requirement. The IDA does have a but-for statement where I would say 98% of my projects show that they wouldn't be able to proceed with the IDA's assistance, but the IDA can approve projects that may be able to proceed without IDA benefits, but the project has to show why the IDA should give them benefits even though they don't need that. That's very, very rare, very few projects. I'll say one project, the only project I have that did not show that but for is the IBM project. That's a settlement project between the state and IBM. And we worked as a pass-through for that. And that didn't have to go through that but for. But the rest of my IDA projects have gone through that but for statement.
My next question was that it seems like 10-year pilots are standards. Obviously, this one is looking at a 15-year span. And could you tell us more about why that might make sense for this project in particular?
So the 15-year span is to align with their financing. So their bank probably had, they're taking out a 15-year mortgage. And so the bank wants to see as much stability in all their payments as possible. So, and one of them is the pilot, so that they know that they're paying a certain payment every year and able to pay their loan, basically, or mortgage.
And just I'm just trying to think about how this all played out. So a company purchased property for $10 million, and at that time they didn't know whether, or they knew at that time that they couldn't build all this without a tax break?
So yes and no. So there are projects that will buy property and think that, okay, I think, given at the time that they buy the property, we might be able to do this without assistance. Mm-hmm. And then they may hold the property for a few years, and then the economic times change, and then they realize, oh, we're going to have to do that. Or they buy the property, but they don't necessarily have all the prices priced out. So they have the concept in mind, but they don't have the project costs, done. Wow. So that is very common. I mean, I can tell you, dozens of properties in Dutchess County where somebody has bought the property and then has either sold the property or still holding on to the property.
And this is not the original developer that bought it a few years ago. You've also had people kicking around that property, possibly buying it for a nonprofit or a religious organization, which we have no say about and would take it off the tax rolls completely.
I have a question which might actually be more for Drew, our legal advisor. Because this project has not been approved by the planning board, is there any conflict of us as the city council saying we approve tax abatement? It seems to be we're essentially saying we approve of the project on some level. So I'm just making sure that doesn't cross any legal lines, or how that works legally.
So the project, before the IDA can approve a project, has to go through the planning process. So if it doesn't go through the planning process, and gets approvals from the planning process, the IDA cannot approve the project. What we're asking for the city council is just to provide their support. They acknowledge that this project is going to be coming to the IDA potentially for a deviated pilot, and that the council supports that project and acknowledges that there's an enhanced pilot. So it's not, the council is not approving the pilot, nor is necessarily approving the project. What you are providing support and consent for is the 15-year pilot.
And just to kind of piggyback off that statement, you're not in any sort of legal trouble for acknowledging the project and saying that you have support for the pilot, even though it's still pending before the planning board. So the planning board's going to review it for planning issues. You're really looking to say, there are benefits to this project in the city. Pending planning board approval, we would support such a pilot. this happens all the time. It's the way it has, procedurally, it's the way it has to work. You're not telling the planning board that they have to approve the project, and so they're still going to go through their review process. They're going to go through the seeker process. They're going to add any conditions that they feel are appropriate to the project. So, that's still happening, and the IDA can't do anything until that process is complete. But they do need to know if the city is, dead set against any sort of pilot with, in this case, Mirabeau, for example.
Thank you.
The one thing I will add, since you reminded me of the planning process, is that the one ask that was occurring during the planning process, which is ongoing, is the interest in Greenway Trail on that side of the creek. There is nothing in our comprehensive plan on that side of the creek. There's nothing in our Greenway Trail plans with respect to that property on that side of the creek. So we really didn't have any notice or authority to require it in the planning process. However, we had opportunities to meet with the owner, and he very graciously agreed to put the Greenway Trail as part of the development, which was a very positive statement with respect to their commitment to the community, and we're very appreciative of that.
I think it's included in the site plans.
Yeah, that's how it's going to work. So they've asked to get it put into the site plans, which is great. That's the only way we can kind of lock it in, right? Because there is no way we could require it.
We've also asked them for a memorandum of agreement that lays that out really clearly.
Any other questions?
And it's typical that these letters of support do not require a vote?
Yes. So I would say it's up to the comfort level of the municipality. Sometimes certain municipalities will give me a formal resolution. Some of them will just give me a simple letter from the head of the municipality, like the mayor or the superintendent. So.
Before you leave, the next one coming down the pike is Tompkins Terrace.
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit about the role you play with bonding? Because we're going to be having that conversation coming up.
So the fourth benefit that IDAs can provide, and I see this mostly on the what the local development corporation side, is tax-exempt bonding. So we can issue tax-exempt bonds for projects. The benefit for a tax-exempt bond is the investor of that bond doesn't have to report capital gains on the interest that they earn. So the bond itself is issued at a lower interest rate than a conventional financing. So that's why it's attractive to projects. On the IDA side, and Tompkins is going to come on the IDA side. On the IDA side, New York State restricts very closely projects that can qualify for IDA bonds. That is affordable housing and manufacturers. So Tompkins is a project that would qualify for a tax-exempt bonding. That is, tax-exempt bonding through the IDA is not bonding on behalf of the municipality. This does not affect your finances at all. These are private placement bonds. Usually the bank is the one who buys them for their investors. So it has no impact on them or on the municipality. The other thing is Tompkins is going to be coming for a pilot. I've yet to see what that formula looks like, but I want to be clear. So in New York State, the state has the authority to issue pilots as well for affordable housing. Tompkins is going to come to the IDA for both a pilot, tax-exempt bonding, because there are certain, there's some flexibility in that project, an advantage for them to do that, because it will align with the bond primarily, and some of the other restrictions that they have on that property. The state's pilot for housing, their pilot doesn't go through this process. It doesn't have any public comment. The state has the right to issue those pilots without public comment.
And that's how Tompkins Terrace was built. We actually got a letter from DHCR, the Department of Housing and Community Renewal, back in the 80s saying, thou shalt give them this pilot agreement. And we have abided by that. That pilot agreement is extinguished in about, I think, 10 or 15 years, after which the affordability could go away. Doing this pilot helps ensure that the affordability of that complex, which has 193 apartments, will remain affordable for 40 years at a minimum. So again, we're getting something out of that. We're retaining our affordable housing stock, and it's not going to just go out of the affordability programs and become market rate. And they're going to be doing improvements, new kitchens, new bathrooms, all new heating and windows. The building got a little bit of a facelift back in 2008, but it's still needing a lot of work.
And as Chris said, you had mentioned 16 million. Actually, I think they're actually going to invest about 36 million in improvements.
My bad. Sorry.
In that area, 24 which will be covered by the bond.
Okay.
The rest will be private equity.
Chris, is that, I know we're already starting to talk about it, but is that something where it sounds like maybe you were already planning on having that as a separate workshop item? It sounds like we don't have to vote on it, but just so we can have a public discussion about the changes,
so
and maybe bring in related management.
Depending on how we line up, next week is really busy for the workshop. We may do it in early January. I have to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought while we have Sarah Lee here, she can talk a little bit about this, because it isn't just one project. It's a tool that's used for multiple things. Like when you did West End Lofts next door, that has a pilot for the affordable part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Lee, can you repeat, why would Tompkins do a pilot with the IDA rather than HCR?
Because they're coming to the IDA for tax-exempt bonding, sometimes the pilot, again, will align with their bond financing terms. And so the bond financing terms and the pilot kind of, when it comes from the same agency, is a little bit more seamless versus if they were to get a pilot from the state, usually those are financed through my competitor, which is the Dormitory Authority. And so the Dormitory Authority would then finance it, and then they would get the pilot from the state. The other advantage in terms of the community is by coming through the IDA, I collect administrative fees for these projects with IDAs. Those fees are then rolled into programming for our local businesses. So for example, right now we're running a GEARS program, which is an accelerator without walls. Susan from Dennings Point is participating in my GEARS program. That program is being financed by some of these administration fees I collect. So those money, as opposed to the Dormitory Authority, those fees stay at the state level, whereas the fees through mine come down to the local level.
Thank you.
Since there's not many pilots in the city, maybe around assessment time, the council can get kind of an update on the pilot properties and what's going on with them and what their new assessed value is. If we only have 4 or 5 in town.
I think we're about 8 or 9 at this point. Yeah, but we can do an update, and that will give us plenty of time to put together like a chart of when these expire, what the terms are.
And then out of all those pilots,
you only have 2, right?
I only have 2 currently, which is Davie South Terrace and Creek Drive.
So the other ones were all done through the state.
Okay. Any other questions? This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I would like, as an internal procedure, I would like to make a request that we do these pilot conversations in public. I don't know if we need to be passing a resolution. I understand we aren't required to pass a resolution, but I appreciate this conversation. In the future, I'd prefer to have this conversation in public.
We wanted to have the initial conversation at the request of the attorney in executive session because there were materials that we shared with you that were proprietary and not public.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
So we can have a pre-conversation in executive session, but I would like, before we send any letters out in the future, would like to have the public discussion as well.
Okay. Everybody good? Sarah, it's a pleasure having you. Thank
Well,
you
I hope
so
I
much.
was able to shed some light on how pilots.
Thank you.
Yes, really helpful.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I have your
Thank
website
you.
bookmarked now, so.
That was a little more than the 15 minutes I said that we would keep her here.
It was time
Thank
well
you.
spent.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do public comments. I've got a list in front of me, and just recall, you can talk on any topic you want other than a public hearing. We have one single public hearing, which happens to be on a building code update where we're incorporating the state's new building code. And other than that, you can talk on anything you like. The order of battle for comments, I got Blair Patterson first. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Blair Patterson. I live at 28 Masters Place, Ward 4. I'm up here tonight to state my support for the recent proposal to ban gas hookups in all new construction. I work for a small business in Beacon, and our main mission as a business is to address the environmental crisis through landscape. We create ecologically focused artistic plans, we build them out, we sell native plants locally on Main Street as well as in a new location on the edge of Beacon and Glenham. And we also educate the community through events and conversations, attempting to augment our work through connecting with the people and the environment that surrounds us, all of us. We've worked on almost 150 gardens in Beacon over the last 5 years, ensuring that Beacon becomes the ecological refuge that we desperately need. I'm extremely passionate about my work, but recently I realized that the work that I do in my day job isn't going to be enough for the type of large-scale change that we actually need. I think what will allow us to make impactful change is legislation like the gas ban on new construction. Methane is a major pollutant and lasts in the atmosphere for 9 years at minimum, and our perpetual reliance on it for residential utilities is totally unnecessary. If we make changes now, we'll actually be able to see the benefits within the next decade and massive benefits within our lifetime. We don't need to continue to rely on gas that actively pollutes at every stage of its journey, especially within our homes. We have the opportunity to be leaders in the Hudson Valley in this instance, to not only be an additional example for other towns and major cities for area to follow suit, but to additionally put pressure on the state to make large-scale changes like this as well. We have 3 million miles of gas line in the United States alone, and we don't need more of it. We certainly don't need to be locked into further reliance on an archaic source of energy when there are a number of other modern options that are significantly cheaper, significantly more efficient, and better for our collective environment and health. And it will literally benefit every one of us collectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Claudia Huerta.
My name is Claudia Huerta. Actually, I'm going to take this off really fast. Sorry. And I'm a resident of Ward 4. I'm also here to express my support for the Beacon City Council to pass a gas-free new buildings policy and ensure that all new buildings in Beacon are prohibited from burning fossil fuels indoors. My partner and I just moved to Beacon, and we've already really fallen in love with the city. We're really eager to plan what our life will be like when we stay here long term, and the biggest goals there are buying a house and starting a family. Both of these goals feel deeply connected to the passage of the gas-free new buildings policy. As future homeowners, we want to invest in a property that will be both cost-efficient and sustainable. With an average projected savings cost of $848 a year with an electric heat pump and 93% fewer carbon emissions, it feels clear to us that the only answer is to go electric. What feels even clearer to us, however, is how our actions today will have lasting consequences on the future family we want to build here in Beacon. Investing in new construction that relies only on gas would mean putting our children at risk, both immediately by exposing them to toxic air pollutants in our home, but also in the long run by continuing to pollute the planet they will inhabit long after we're gone. For these reasons, I urge the City Council to schedule a public hearing to discuss crafting and passing a gas-free new buildings bill that bans indoor gas hookups in all buildings. I'm really excited to build a life here in Beacon, and I'm committed to fighting for the sustainable future the city deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Ashoka.
Good evening. My name is Erin Ashoka. I'm a resident of Ward 2, and I too am here to express my support for the Beacon City Council to pass a local law that ensures that no new developments are built with gas hookups. Firstly, I wanted to thank Councilmember Dan Imer-Blair and Paloma Wake for bringing this topic onto a recent agenda, as well as the rest of the council for your willingness to discuss this topic, and the city attorney for agreeing to look into model laws from New York City and Ithaca to really think about what is the best version that will work for us here in Beacon. So why does this matter to me? For as long as I can remember, I've wanted to have kids, and I'm now at a point where a point in my life where I'm seriously considering having a baby. I always thought that this would be a joyous and hopeful time, and in some ways it is, but it's also a time of great fear and anxiety as I consider our climate future. The signs are all there that we are in a very precarious position, both as I think about my own lived experience, but also as I look at the news and see the science about the state that our world is in. But I am actually choosing to practice hope despite this by joining with my neighbors as a member of Beacon Climate Action Now and organizing in service of creating a new narrative around our climate future and what our world is capable of achieving together. And that future looks like us starting locally, where we work together as a community, where we pass laws that allow us to make these improvements to get back on track to achieving the climate future that I desire and I believe that we all collectively desire. So you, as members of the Beacon City Council, have the opportunity to lead. You have the opportunity to lead locally by passing a gas-free new buildings policy and ensuring that all new buildings in Beacon are prohibited from burning fossil fuels. But you also play an important role in thinking about the statewide conversation about smart climate policy. Because if we pass this law here in Beacon and we join with our neighbors in New York City and Ithaca, we start to build consensus and support that we need a statewide policy, such as the All-Electric New Buildings Act, to ensure that the entire state is joining us in ensuring that no new developments are burning fossil fuels. This is common sense policy. You've heard about
15 seconds.
that it will save renters and homeowners, but it also is a policy that has broad public support. I've been knocking on doors. I've been at local events. We've been doing the work to build public consensus around this. We have over 400 Beaconites who've signed a petition in favor. So I urge you to draft this legislation, hold a public hearing, and pass this policy here in Beacon. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Austin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susan Austin. I'm a proud member of Ward 2. And 4 years ago, my family built a gas-free house here in Beacon. So I wanted to come and talk today a little bit about that experience. Many people have talked about the various reasons, probably our reasons aligned with that, climate, health, but I want to actually talk about the economic reason, which was a reason for us, particularly because for me, and at least where I'm located, is the area that we heard when we were building, but also I continue to hear the most, I think, misunderstanding around. So when we were getting ready to build, when we were approaching many various people, everyone was like, it's gonna be so expensive for you to do this. It's gonna be complicated. There's going to be issues attached with this. And I will not stand up here and say that like there were no complications or it was wildly cheap. But the impression that we got approaching this was not our experience. So we built an 1,800 square foot house. The comparisons, because we were pre-pandemic, this was 4 years ago, are hard, but we built our house for under $200 a square foot, which even by those standards was less than average, I think, in Dutchess. I can look at the numbers, but and I don't have data on this, but I can tell you amongst talking to our friends, we have the lowest energy bills of anybody we know amongst our friends. So what I want to just talk about is like the misinformation of that, and how also just, actually what Aaron just said inspired me to say this, which is like, I think there's a lot of fear around this, and that Beacon not only has the opportunity to lead, I think, in terms of legislation, which I'm fully in support of, but also in terms of helping people along, because I do think this is a transitional moment, and I do think people are afraid. I think people don't like change, and I think even things about new technologies that people don't understand. There's a lot to know about all of this. So I just want to say, not only in support of Gas-Free Beacon and the legislation, but say that I do think the council and the community has a moment to be able to say, we're not helpless to climate change. We're not helpless to toxins in the environment. We're not just a sort of victim to this economic moment, that we can do things that are actually possible today, that are affordable, that can make the community, I think, more whole in a proactive way. Because I know that like when we were starting to build the house, and I'll just say this last thing I'll say quick, is
15 seconds.
Thank you. Perfectly timed, is that like we at first were discouraged, and we're like, we work at nonprofits, maybe we can't afford to do this. And then luckily we got hooked up with the right people who were like, no, you could do this if you do this and this and this. And so I think as a community we have an opportunity. And when I hear about, now I'm going over, but when I hear about potential big building in Beacon and stuff like that, I think, my gosh, the impact we could make because of the developments that's happening here. So anyway, I'm in full support, and I hope we can move ahead on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Teresa Kraft.
I just want to start by saying I live in a really old house that started with no heat. It started with wood. It started with coal, gas, and I have natural gas, and I say it's a blessing. It took everything in my power to be here tonight, but I had to come and say that New York State electric grid cannot handle a full electric state, or in our small city that this council is advocating for. With no natural gas new build capacity in new construction or extensive rebuild moving forward. Do you want to be told that you can't plug in your toys, or you can only plug in your electric car that can travel only 350 miles without another charge? You can't do what you want to do. Do you want to live in crisis mode like the state of California when you're told at 3 p.m. in the afternoon that you can't plug in your electric car or turn on your air conditioner? I don't think that's where I want to live, because I chose to live in Beacon in 1977. I believe in moderation. I want us to talk about processed food that is killing our residents, young and old. That's what's killing us, not, gas, electric, and all that. It's the other crap. Many people who are living in new development projects who have electric heat pumps spent the last few years freezing their asses off in their $1 million condos. In horror, we're watching the crisis on the southern border. The Democrats have opened our borders for immigrants seeking sanctuary cities like many. I am thankful for our previous administration who chose to designate Beacon as a welcoming city. The strain on our medical system and our social services is jeopardizing all of us. Think about the numbers in November. The U.S. has let enough people in our unsecured borders to fill 26 and a half cities the size of Beacon. And that's just the month of November. We can't save the world's problem, but we can save our city. Let's start by enforcing traffic laws and parking laws and violations happening daily throughout the city before our very eyes. I am in support of the Dutchess County IDA's support of the Marabou seeking payment in lieu of tax relief. I think the city will gain prosperity for all residents. With this project in the scope of the city, as a live-work community, our residents and youth can find future employment in the hotel and the environmental green food industry. This project will leave this historic property available to all city residents as a site for employment and a treasure to visit, and the trails to explore along the creek. Tonight, our city administrator mentioned the pre-settlement, Native American Indians, the sites along the creek, way long before Madame Brett, the first and oldest house in Dutchess County in 1706.
15 seconds.
Thank you. I'd rather see this remain open to our community than locked into a site forever hidden from Beacon residents. I prefer this project than the last owner who planned on subdividing the land into high-density housing with proposed apartments and buildings. They showed us that concept 4 years ago by a religious group, and that would have been off the tax records forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Ben, you got anyone online?
Yes, we have a couple of people attending online. I'll read our instructions. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise hand option at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're using a phone, you may press *9 and you will need to press *6 to unmute once called upon. If you're watching on YouTube, you will need to join the Zoom by visiting beaconny.gov. And as of now, we have no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, let's move on. We got a public hearing to do, so I'll need a motion to open the public hearing regarding a proposed local law to amend Chapter 119 of the Code of the City concerning administration and enforcement of the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code and the State Energy Conservation Construction Code to incorporate recent updates to the state statute.
Motion to what Lee just said?
Second.
That was Molly and Justice. Thank you so much. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so the public hearing is open. Will someone please explain what I said?
Sure. I'm gonna jump right in. So in 2020, the state updated the Uniform Code and then the State Energy Code. As a result, they then had to update the regulations, which are located in 19 NYCRR Part 1203. As a result, the state said, okay, municipalities in New York, you have 1 year to incorporate these changes into your municipal codes. So the regulations were adopted December 2021. We have until December 30th, 2022 to update our building, construction, and uniform code enforcement program to incorporate all the changes set forth in Part 1203. So this law just goes and incorporates those changes that are mandated by the state into Chapter 119, which sets forth our administration and enforcement of the Uniform Code and the State Energy Code. This has nothing to do with the electrification of buildings that we've been talking about, and we can talk about that in the future. This is strictly to meet the state's deadline and incorporate the necessary changes set forth in Part 1203.
Wow, you left everyone speechless, Drew.
I know.
That was amazing. Should we applaud?
I'm looking, I'm like, okay, are they speechless or are they sleeping?
Is it your Zoom?
I know. And tap on my camera.
Okay, so that's what the public hearing's about. Anyone want to make a comment in the physical arena?
They all left the room, so I'll just speak. I say yes, go ahead and update the Uniform Code, but the only way the proposed local law will work is if the city is strict and transparent in its enforcement of this Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code and the State Energy Conservation Code. I just question why some of the new commercial developments are still being built without true fire code materials, basically a stick frame construction. Yes, there will be elevators installed, but once the heat of a fire exists in the picture, elevators become obsolete for public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone online want to make a comment? Ben?
No hands raised online.
I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing on whatever this is about.
Motion to close this public hearing.
Second.
That was Molly and Justice again. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Okay. Let's do reports. You want to start with Molly?
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, I really appreciate all the members of the public who reached out about the pilot that we're considering about Mirabeau, and we had a public conversation I thought was really fruitful. So I appreciate them thinking about this, and would agree with Paloma that that in the future, if we have these things, such as with Tompkins Terrace, that there's an opportunity to discuss publicly whether or not we as a city council want to vote on anything formally. I think that I certainly really value the opinions of others, and I think it's great for the public to be informed as well. And the only other thing that I will add is that I will not have formal office hours in December, but you can feel free to reach out to me at my email address, which is mrhodes, RHODES, @beaconny.gov if you want to talk to me about anything. I'm happy to schedule some time. And over to you, Justice.
Hi, thank you, Molly. I'm going to keep it brief as well. This, over the past week, I had the opportunity to attend the Traffic and Safety Committee meeting again with Molly, and I want to give them a lot of praise because they are a well-oiled machine, and they are really looking out for the safety of people here in Beacon, and those meetings are open to the public. The next one's going to be in January, but I just want to thank them for addressing all of the concerns that I brought from my constituents, and I want to thank everybody that's come to me with your traffic and safety concerns, and I want to continue figuring them out with all of you and making sure that we keep the city safe. And, that's all I have for tonight.
Good evening. I just wanted to announce that we'll be having a press release coming this week. We'll be announcing that in the future, at the police department, all those who have hypodermic needles that they need medically and are used and are accumulating at home, that we'll have a drop-off facility at the police department. Up until now, those people who daily use hypodermic needles were encouraged to throw them out in the garbage. So through the great effort of Chris White, our city administrator, Chief Sands Frost, and Detective Durkin, we now have this will be there at the police department.
It's live now.
It's live now. So if you have needles, and I know a number of my friends need the service, and they've accumulated needles for many, many years, so please drop them off at the police department. And that's it, but thanks again. I really appreciate you following up on this, Chris.
Well, thanks for bringing it to our attention, and to Detective Durkin for doing the 10 hours of training that was required by the State Health Department.
Yeah, it's not simply just a container.
It was a little harder than we thought.
A lot of red tape.
But thanks for the patience.
Yeah.
Oh, right, sorry, we skipped you. Hello, everyone. I wanted to make one announcement, which is that Communities for Local Power are hosting a workshop on December 8th at Newburgh Free Library to help people understand how to enroll in the state's low-income electric and gas debt relief program. The deadline to apply is the end of the year, December 31st, 2022. Low-income households can potentially have all of their debts for past electric and gas bills forgiven in full. You can find out more information at bit.ly/NoMoreDebt2022, or just look up Communities for Local Power and find more information through them. And lastly, my office hours, my last of the month, will be this Sunday, December 11th from 4 to 6 p.m. I'm going back to Happy Valley because they have heat lamps outside. And they're also a lovely place, and it's a great place to bring your kids and make them play games while you talk to me about whatever you have to talk to me about. Or your kids have things to tell me. That's fine too. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paloma. The only thing I have is that upward of 5 years and up are eligible for the boosters now that defend against the Omicron subvariants. So if you didn't know, that's available now. To you, Dan.
So just a reminder that I hold my office hours on the third Sunday of every month. This month, that is Sunday the 18th And I'll be at Trax Coffee House at 1 East Main from 10 to 12 o'clock. And I don't know why I keep calling them office hours when there's definitely not an office. But office hours, Sunday the 18th. And I also wanted to say that I appreciate that we're going to have conversations about IDA pilot conversations in public going forward. And it's good that we could have, if we need private conversation prior to that we can have it. I'd also like to have a public conversation about community choice aggregation and community distributed generation, which are the options that we have, or the different tools that we have for ensuring Beacon is consuming clean energy, and they're both opt-out programs, and we have decisions to make. And I think putting the pros and cons of these programs on the table would be helpful. And there is someone in Beacon who works on both of these programs and other programs like them. So if we want to have a really rich conversation, perhaps we could invite him in. I don't want to volunteer him tonight by name, but I think this is there's been a lot of consternation over the years about the CCA. It's a very good program, but people are quite passionate about this. Energy bills are making people a little uneasy. So any kind of public discussion that we have about this, I think we should always be erring on sharing as much information with the public as possible and getting their input as possible. Thanks.
Okay. I'm just appreciative for everyone who was here and spoke, and I am otherwise good. I will add one anecdote. I had the opportunity to attend a reception at the superintendent's house at West Point. My spouse worked there at West Point for a number of years. She was editor of the West Point magazine and head of marketing communications for the Association of Graduates. So it was fun for her because she retired from there a year or so ago. And I ran into the head of the Economic Development Agency of Orange County, so that was Sarah's counterpart in Orange, as well as some others there. And I will just say consistently, I was identified as the elected official from Beacon, and how many comments we got from people at the event, and the event was well attended by local electeds. That particular session was for local electeds in the West Point area, of just how popular we are and how thoughtful people were in terms of the turnaround that's occurred here, especially the lifelong residents. And it was just kind of gratifying to hear, and I'm always appreciative of how much work's been done over the last 3 decades by a number of councils and administrations, and I think we all benefit from it. So otherwise, that's all I got. City Administrator?
I just want to remind you, we have 2 meetings left this year. We have a workshop next Monday, and then your final voting meeting on the 19th. We have a ton to pack in next week, including presentations from the high school about participatory budgeting. We had a very successful bid for the abatement phase of asbestos in our firehouse, so we'll be bringing you a contract to award. I did talk to the attorney this afternoon, and he hopes to bring a decision tree about the fossil fuel-free buildings in January, and we're trying to find, I've asked him to try to find the ability to just do that as simply as possible and see if we can, jump over having to model the performance of buildings to just electric. So he is exploring that. And that's all I have.
Sorry, that reminded me one question. When on the agenda are we going to discuss our meeting schedule for next year?
Next week.
Great.
Yeah, we're going to have a long meeting next week. Sorry.
I'll bring coffee.
Yes.
I'll bring Christmas cookies.
Oh, that's even better.
Oh.
I just offered my sons, by the way, basically, publicly, so.
Local laws and resolutions, let's get through them. So the first one is a resolution authorizing the city administrator to sign an agreement with Keenan Bean for legal services. Do you want to do 1, 2, and 3 together?
Your choice.
All right, and then the second one is authorizing the city administrator to sign an agreement with Lankin Tully for engineering services, and the third, sign an agreement with John Clark for planning services. Can I get a motion for each of those, and then a second for each of those? We'll do them all. We'll do them one vote at a time, I guess. Unless, Drew, can I do all? Can we do all
you
three
bundle
together?
them, Drew? Can we do a motion to bundle and then vote on all three?
If she comes off mute.
Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know why I was struggling with my mic. Yes, I would do a motion to vote on all of them together and then take the vote.
All right, so can I get a motion to put those three together?
Motion.
Second.
Ren and George, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So can I get a motion on the three resolutions collectively to appoint Keenan Bean for legal, Lankin Tully for engineering, and Clark for planning?
Motion to appoint legal, engineering, and planning.
That's Ren.
Second.
And a second by Molly. Any discussion?
And actually, just what the decision tree that Chris was talking about, I was wondering, under the legal contract, it talks about preparation of complex legislation as something that would be in addition to our retainer, and I'm wondering if there's a line between those two, between non-complex and complex, I guess.
We haven't hit complex yet.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So again, I think they kind of put that in as a catch-all if we're going to, let's say we were going to wholly redo large sections of our code.
Like a big rezoning situation, but
Yeah.
not, the leaf blower decision tree is just our regular legislation.
Yeah.
It's like, so like a comprehensive plan, when that comes up again, that part of you have an involvement in that, if we change zoning.
And I think, again, there's give. If we're not using the hours for other things, we could have a conversation with the attorneys to say, hey, under this new agreement, if we go outside the retainer and they're spending on an hourly basis, they have to inform me and get approval before we do that.
Great, thank you.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. One down or three down, depending on how we want to count. The next one is a proposed local law to amend Chapter 119. This is the one that we had the public hearing on, which is the code of the City of Beacon concerning administration and enforcement of the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code and the State Energy Conservation Construction Code. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second. So, Justice and Dan, any discussion? Having just had it explained by Drew before, we can have her explain it again, and but we run the risk of the meeting getting derailed by the chair falling asleep. Any other comments?
Mayor, can I just make one comment? Not a summary of the
I'm
law, I
listening.
promise.
Really? Yes.
I just want to say, traditionally, we do not vote on local laws in the same night we have the public hearing. Sometimes we do for traffic. In this case, because these are mandates by the state and we have to get it to the state by December 31st, that is why it was a public hearing and a vote. So I just wanted to, put that on the record and clarify.
Okay.
I also just want to say I appreciate the updates to the gender pronouns that were in the previous draft, and so I appreciate the changes in this draft.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? The next one is authorizing the naming of the Townsend Street extension. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
From Justice and Dan? Ren, you're in Ward 3, right?
All right, thanks, Dan.
And so, Drew, just to see if I can explain this. We have a street named Townsend. At the end of the street is a new development of 13 homes. And we're extending Townsend into that area, and we're just naming that extension Townsend.
That's correct, Mayor, and that is required by the code that the extension match the name of the existing road.
All right, so that means we don't have a choice, but we have a resolution. And any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Number 6, we have 2 amendments to the operating budget, if I recall. And
Yes.
Chris, do you want to discuss them, or do I want to introduce them? Let me get a motion and a second for 2 amendments to this year's budget. A change of $52,000 into purchase equipment and taken from insurance recoveries, and $10,000 into purchase equipment and taken from the contingency fund. Can I get a motion and second?
Motion.
So.
Dan.
Paloma and Dan.
Paloma and Dan?
Molly and Dan.
Molly and Dan?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait.
What?
All right, who wants it?
I don't get any motions this week. It's fine.
No, Paloma.
I thought you said it. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay,
Molly,
go for
Molly
it.
and Dan can have it.
All right, Paloma and Dan is the decision.
There you go.
Okay. Chris?
So these are both in the general fund. The first budget item is to put $52,000 into police equipment and take that money from our insurance settlements. This is for a car that
that's
was
the car.
totaled. We got an insurance payment for that, and we had a couple other smaller ones, and we're going to upgrade from an all-gas vehicle to an all-electric vehicle, and this will be the second all-electric vehicle in our detective fleet. Yes, and the second one is directly from our budget discussions. We're moving $10,000 from contingency to purchase of equipment for portable radar speed signs, one with an emoji and one just a regular one.
There was a question or more comment that came up in one of the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee meeting about whether or not those 2 signs are solar powered. I think they're not. They run on batteries, and I didn't know if that was something that, if there's a reason why they're not solar powered, they're not offered, or they're more expensive. So I just wanted to flag that with whatever we do decide to purchase.
Okay.
I don't have a strong, I mean, if there is a solar power option, great, but I'm also not feeling the need to weigh in that we have to do solar if it's more expensive. So.
I'll talk to the chief and figure out.
Great,
I know we've had issues with the batteries running down, so I thought the intent was to get a solar.
Yeah, I think that was the thought about, like, if we had that option, it might actually make it easier to put it out and use it in the field. But
Right.
but again, I'm not an expert on these things, so.
We'll figure it out.
Great, thank you.
All right.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, and then the last item is the approval of minutes of November 21st. This is another opportunity for a motion and a second.
Motion.
George?
Second.
And
There you
Paloma. This is also the opportunity for additions, corrections, omissions, or other
This is the
commentary
worst part of the meeting.
concerning our minutes of November 21st.
I had a question about the comments, the language under public hearing for the proposed 2023 budget. We continued the public hearing from a previous session. So I didn't know if the word open is correct, because we might have actually literally said open in the meeting, or if it should say continued or to reopen. I guess maybe, Drew, that's a legal question for you.
It should say continuation of the public hearing.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
I'll
So,
update.
Ben, if you've noted that one change, if we approve the minutes as, with that one change, is that all right with everyone? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Second opportunity for public comment for someone who hasn't spoken in the past. Would you like to?
Hey.
Please, come, state your
How are
name
you?
and where
Peter
you live.
Skorowitz. We'll go start with town videographer. We'll go with that one first. City videographer. You guys were talking last week, and I don't know if you had time to look. Ben had asked me about the meetings. I think Paloma had said sometimes it gets cumbersome trying to bang through find what you need. So what Ben had asked me, and because we have so many meetings now on YouTube, we're able to separate everything into playlists. Didn't realize it last week when I texted you, he already had that taken care of with the county. So if you look at the front page of our website, down at the bottom, your bigger photos are city council and city workshops. Underneath it, there's another bar that's all planning. Underneath that, there's another bar that's all zoning. So residents can simply click what they want and scroll through the same, excuse me, the same way. The date, the newest will appear for, there we go. Look at that. See, I talk and he pulls it right up for us.
He's good
There's
like
your
that.
regular meetings, and then you've got a bar for planning and a bar for zoning. And they will list from newest to oldest, so it's all separated. People don't have to scroll through 40 meetings to find that. So as I process the meetings, they'll stay on the main YouTube channel if residents follow that. If not, then they can go to whatever they need to. But it's a good little thing with YouTube as well, and it'll stay with the closed captioning that we have even on the main site. Okay, that hat off, Homeowners Association hat back on. Want to thank Chris on behalf of Metro Homeowners from Roundtree Court. We got our road paved this year. The guys were great. Really, the reason for me being here is you guys need to know the good sometimes. I know a lot of people come up here and complain. I have a neighbor whose wife is in hospice care. So he's got nurses coming in, he's got therapists coming in, music therapists. Between the city DPW and the company you guys hired, they worked with him to a T to make sure that his people could come in for his wife, no issues. We also have another resident up in the back who's in and out with dialysis, so he had to get out a couple times. So as far as me, you know, like I said, I'm on the HOA, we had no issues. The guys were great from the city and from the company that you hired. So just so you know that. And third, as a proud parent, and I'm also putting this out, Yanarella School of Dance, 66 years old here in Beacon, has officially been invited to dance at the Disney Parade. So we are all headed down, including my daughter, this weekend, and they are going to be dancing in the Main Street Parade representing Beacon, as well as performing on the big stage at Downtown Disney. They get 20 minutes to do a couple numbers. I was told that this is part of the annual holiday parade that they show on Christmas Day or the day after Christmas on ABC. So we will see a piece of Beacon, hopefully, in the parade. Wow. So we're proud of that. It's going to be a good weekend.
That's great.
Thank you much for everything. That's it.
Thank you, Pete. Ben, you got anyone online?
There are no hands raised online.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Ren and Dan, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. If I don't see you, happy
Thanks,
holidays,
Drew.
everyone.
You too, Drew. Happy holidays.